If you are an empty nester and you're miserable, it's probably your fault.
He said, you refuse to take credit for their successes, but you willingly take credit for their flaws.
This habit we have of letting the surliest member of the family set the tone for get-togethers or even day-to-day life is done. It's over. You want a great relationship with your adult kids? Get busy looking in the mirror. Nobody's going to fix this but me. It's got to be me. You can't fix it for me.
And if we were trying to rely on our children to do the fixing, it's unhealthy.
I do think it's time for parents to grow up and recognize, look, this is me. This is on me. I can change this. And it might not change my circumstances, but it's sure going to make it a lot easier to walk through.
Reframe how you think. If you're fearful of this next season, those words will become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, they will.
Welcome back to Beyond the Nest.
I mean, that is the name of the podcast, so.
And everyone just got to see that you are not that.
I mean, you don't call me Alicia. You call me Allison, because my real name's Allison, so.
Sometimes I call you Elsa, because you act like somebody else.
Goodness gracious.
Anyway, so.
Yeah. This is going to be a difficult podcast today.
It might be if you keep acting like this. I do want to talk about something. It is kind of a touchy topic, maybe a little bit heavy at times, but I want to start off with the conversation that I had with an entrepreneur, a single mom, a 7-figure earner.
Wow.
So she is
good for her.
Very successful.
Yeah.
But I was at an event back in October, and we had talked a little bit about the book, The Legacy Navigator. She was asking questions about the intentional legacy side. And she let me know that she is absolutely scared to death of this empty nest season. And I asked her how old her kids were. She had a 17-year-old and I think a 14-year-old. And I'm like, well, what's to be afraid of? And she had created so many potentially traumatic events that have never happened. Obviously, the 17-year-old's still living at home, still in high school, but she was scared to death of losing relationship, losing connection. She didn't say losing control, but I think a lot of parents do fear that.
Sure.
She didn't say it. And I think most empty nesters would not quickly acknowledge that it's a lack of control concern, but I think it is.
Yeah.
But she was scared to death. Those are her words. I am scared to death. So we got to be careful about our words, but that spoke volumes to me about where she was mentally. Mm-hmm. She had already decided empty nest was not going to be a pleasurable experience.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to that?
Well, I will say for probably the majority, it's not. I haven't done a specific elaborate study on it, but the majority of things that I read, even my own story, like, let's just be real, my own story was not a pleasurable experience. And when I look back, I can't blame it on anybody other than me. It was my fault, So I think the challenge today is making a bold statement to say that if you are an empty nester and you're miserable, it's probably your fault.
Look in the mirror.
Look in the mirror. Not
saying that to be unempathetic, because we've been there. We've felt the hurt or the pain on it, but at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And, when we have real close relationships, then I probably wouldn't even say that. If it was a real close relationship, I wouldn't say it's all your fault, look in the mirror. But in the context of we've got a few minutes here, maybe that's the wake-up call that we got to recognize. If I were to be, talk to this lady even further, I could look at her and say, you're manufacturing all these things on your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're creating.
She hasn't even lived it yet.
No.
And she's playing out in her mind this cinematic production of what she is expecting to happen.
And if I were to have time to spend with her, I could probably find out, where did you get your information?
Yeah.
And it's probably from other empty nest parents. And again, she's a unique situation. She's an entrepreneur making 7 figures, doing quite well. So money's not the issue.
Yeah.
But something has triggered her from a fear-based perspective that this is not going to be a good season for her.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think for those of you that are shocked that I would say, well, if you are in a bad empty nest situation and you're unhappy and you're miserable, it's probably your fault. I think that there are always extenuating circumstances You know, we all have extenuating circumstances in our own empty nest process. But when I look back, I was in charge of how I processed it. I was in charge of how I dealt with it, of how I woke up every day and showed up, you know. And so at the end of the day, if I'm miserable in, you know, the fact that my kids have left, then I don't have anyone to blame but myself, because I'm in charge of me. I'm in charge of my choices, and I can make the choice to sit in it or to, you know, do some things to help myself. And so, yeah, I'm not meaning to be rude. I just think that that's where we are.
I don't think that when we came into the empty nest season that we were really cognizant of really what to expect. Maybe there are books out there, we didn't know about it, but doesn't seem to be a whole lot of resources out there to equip people moving into empty nest. And that's really a big part of what we're talking about here. What do you do when you get beyond the nest? What do you do when your children get beyond the nest? But I'm thinking about from our perspective, you and I approach this totally differently.
Well, tell us, how did you handle the empty nest? Like, what were you expecting from it?
I feel like we get what we expect, if that can be brutally honest. Yeah. If I expect the worst, even no matter what happens, if I'm expecting the worst, my filter will frame that from, I got what I expected. I was expecting my boys to launch well and be productive members of society. But I wasn't looking to have daily chats or weekly luncheons. I mean, I didn't really think through it, but I did not put a lot of what I would consider unhealthy expectations on them. But again, that was my framework. That was what I was looking for. And that's why I'm saying you and I, we approached it so different. I was excited and had been excited for years.
To get me all to yourself.
To get you all to myself. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But you didn't view it that way.
No, I didn't.
So what did you expect? What did you get? How did you handle it?
Well, I don't know really. I don't remember what I expected, because I don't know that I put a lot of thought into it.
Exactly.
And that was a big mistake. However, if I roll back the hands of time, so many things were happening. Like, I literally was, you know, most people, when you're old enough to go through empty nest, most women are approaching a big major hormonal change in their life. And that had happened with me. I'd had a hysterectomy. And so my hormones played a huge part in some of my unhappiness. I had to address that. If I had sat in the place of just putting my head in the sand and not dealing with my hormones, well, we all would have still be, you know, messed up over it. A couple of our kids were, you know, just being knuckleheads and not making the best decisions. So dealing, not just one, two, dealing with all that at the same time, you know, and the fact that I'm sitting there in this place going, what do I do? Like, who do I have to take care of now besides you? And you're self-sufficient. Like, I didn't know who I was. And so many things hit me at the same time, and I sunk into a depression. I really struggled. I don't know if you would call it clinical depression. I think that, if I remember correctly, and you might remember, I think I even took a mild antidepressant for a season.
You did. Just
to help me. And that was a big deal for me, because
it was against our, quote, religious beliefs.
Well, right? I don't know about that, but you know, and I love the church. I'm not trying to bash against the church, but in our church circles, or, you know, it felt to me like, wow, something's wrong with me. I'm not trusting God enough for my joy if I have to resort to medication here. But looking back, that was an immature thought process on my part, because if I'm sick, if I have an infection, a bacterial infection, it's okay to take an antibiotic, isn't it? You know? So it messed with some of our thinking, but we had to kind of like reframe how we thought about just a little bit of intervention.
So I think what's interesting, though, you shared, I think what most people going into empty nest is, we don't really think about what to expect. Mm-mm. At a subconscious level, we have an idea of what maybe is going to happen. And then when it doesn't happen and those expectations don't align. So how many times we talked about if we knew exactly who the audience were, we would be able to direct conversations here. So as far as who is this one for, ideally what we've just described is people with children, say 10, 12, 13 and up. It's like, how can we help frame how to prepare for empty nest? Because if we are thinking like this young lady or this lady that the entrepreneur, I would be able to reframe what to expect. Mm-hmm. But again, there's not a lot of resources out there. So I think a big part of this is if you have children still at home, I want to share with them some ideas to get ready, to prepare for, manage expectations. And I'm going to share an example of what an older gentleman helped me with at one point. But it's also for these parents that are already empty nests.
Yeah.
And they may be 1 year into it or 5 years into it. What can we do to help shift the thinking or reframe some verbiage so that we can maybe resource? Again, we just want to be a help. We're not gurus. We just want to help people think through how can we really enjoy empty nest? Because honestly, it should be the most liberating and exciting time of our life outside of the first year of honeymoon marriage, right? So I want to share this story, though. You'd mentioned a couple of the boys were making bonehead decisions. Do you remember you made that comment?
Yeah.
And I remember I don't remember who it was. We were in Memphis, and there was this is the second time in Memphis, 11, 12, somewhere through there. And
14, 15, yeah.
Somewhere
I know.
through that phase, but I was distraught. And again, well, I'll finish that statement. I was distraught based upon the decisions they were making. What it was actually happening, as I was as concerned about them and the decisions they were making, but you know what else I was concerned about?
You.
I was making it about me. Mm-hmm. I was concerned, how does this make me look as a dad?
Yeah.
Shallow, I get it. But this older guy, he told me, first of all, you've raised young men that are based upon their raising, they're able to make their own decisions. But it is a free will. And he told me that you cannot take credit for their successes. Or he said, you refuse to take credit for their successes, but you willingly take credit for their flaws. Because I remember at that point, one of them was he's on staff at a church. I mean, appearance looked like he was doing well. I mean, he had his own issues, but it was like, they're like, oh man, you got to be so proud of him. Yeah. And I was quick to say, he did that on his own. That was entirely up to him. And then this other type, I'm saying, I suck as a dad. Well, you can't have both sides. Yeah. I can't take credit for this one's success unless I'm willing to also take credit for their flaws. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if I refuse to take success credit, I should refuse to take the flaw credit.
Yeah.
I'm going to love them both, equip them and resource, do all the things, but that was very liberating to me. And it allowed me to recognize when they make their bonehead decisions, that's not on me.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
True. Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that, feeling that way is pretty normal. It's how you work through it. How do we work through feeling like, oh man, where'd we go? Because, you do raise your kids. You raise them purposefully to make decent decisions, but we forget that sometimes when they make their own choices, those are the lessons that they learn the most from.
Oh, absolutely. You always learn more from the setbacks, the obstacles, what you overcome. I mean, if you even think about the framework of any good movie, if it doesn't have an overcoming aspect to it, it's probably not a great movie, right? Yeah. So it's like life is that way. And I feel like, how many times do I want God to remove me from the fire? But if he just constantly removes me from the fire, am I really getting any stronger?
Yeah.
Some of the things that were, the decisions, or, we've talked about the real estate stuff. Going through this is just going to make me even better.
Yeah. As
long as I don't bail. Right? Someone was telling me about the story of David when, David abandoned his calling for a season.
Yeah.
He'd just killed Goliath and people were singing his praises. David has killed or Saul's killed his thousands, David's killed his 10,000s, woo, everything about David. But he ended up fleeing because he got so tired of defending himself against Saul that he ended up running into the Philistines' camp as an insane person. Because back in that day, apparently if you killed an insane person, the demons that were on them would jump all over you. So they did not kill crazy people or insane people.
Interesting.
And so David was masquerading as a crazy man to get away from Saul, but he was literally running away from his calling because he got tired.
Yeah.
And he did that for a good number of years. And then the whole story comes back into, Ziklag. You can read the story, but he got to the point where he was pulled back into his identity. And as thinking about as a dad, again, my identity is to equip and resource.
Yeah.
But what they do, that's
on them.
It's on them.
Yeah. Even though it does affect the whole family.
Oh, it
affects
does.
parents. So.
Yeah.
So you were asking before, what would you tell people sitting in this place? Like even people with 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old, I think one of the big things is you have to learn to let go. You got to let go. And we've talked about this before. What does letting go look like? Well, it looks like dropping your kid off at maybe a birthday party for the first time and leaving them, or maybe their first sleepover, or at 16, the first time
That's the first one
your
I was thinking
kid drives the car out of the driveway. These are all little acts of letting go. And we were even talking the other day about put the baby in the water, you're talking about David. This is about Moses, back in the day, Pharaoh was threatened with the Israelites. And so he made a decree that the midwives kill all the baby boys that were born, to drown them in the very water that Moses' mother saved him in.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine what it felt like to her to put her infant son in a basket in the water. And, the rest of the story is it's an amazing story. You should go read it. But these are examples of what it looks like to put the basket in the water, when they graduate, when you drop a kid off at college, So the letting go doesn't happen when they leave for college. The letting go happens when they're younger.
Yeah, we've talked about before, or with different questions, it's a progression.
It's definitely a progression.
I would think too, as we think through this, it's probably easier to begin the progression of letting go at 12, 13, 14, instead of having a massive let go at age 18, right? If we take the steps along the way, and even from the framework of, I am intentionally letting go along the way, and eventually having the conversation, eventually I'm going to let you go out of the house. Yeah. That is a major shift in thought processes.
Sure. If
we think of it now, we can use this let's call this lady Sally, the entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. If Sally were to have someone like you, another mom that could begin to speak life into her, first of all, I believe you would be able to, just by conversing with her,
help her reframe,
and eliminate all of that trauma that nothing's happened yet, but she's creating it.
Or fear. That fear is kind of a control factor. And I think the fear results from believing that we do lose control. But I honestly think, looking back on our own lives, control is a facade. We didn't,
it is.
There were so many things we thought we had control over, and we really didn't.
Yeah.
And we love controlling things in our Western American society. Think about it. Yeah. We like to control, the thermostat in the house. We control I do control the thermostat because, again, postmenopausal woman. So, but there's so many things we don't have control over, but he has ultimate control. And I'm reminded of the scripture, Jeremiah 29:11. How many times have we've quoted this? We've heard it. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Well, God didn't want me to sit in my depressive empty nest phase. That's not the hope and future He's talking about for me as a mom. Just I would never read this and think, oh, the hope in the future for my kids once they leave the nest is whoa, it's not going to be good. We have to change some of our thinking around our expectations of empty nest. Will there be hard times? Yes, there always are. Like, we cannot escape that. But if our mind isn't fixed right, then it's going to be double hard, triple hard, you know?
Yep. So we've talked a little bit about Sally and being a single mom entrepreneur, but what about these families? Again, we're specifically right now talking about kids still at home. What happens when you've got a husband and wife, and the husband and wife view this season
totally differently? Like us?
Kind of like we did.
Yeah. What do you do about it?
What do you do about it?
Well, you have to talk. You have to talk. You know?
There's very few things, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there's very few things when someone said, if you could go back and do things differently, what would it be? There's very few things that I could really think about doing differently. There's some on the work side I know that, but I can say this part right here. We were very intentional in communication. We've been doing that First Friday deal to get on the same page, but we did not discuss empty nest type stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't really know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of slammed us in the face one day.
It slammed me in the face.
Well, yes.
And then it slammed you in the face because it slammed me in the face.
That's a good point.
So, yeah. But you have to communicate. And I think that there are times, because I do remember feeling like, even in the midst of this season, like if you had asked me, honey, what's wrong? Like, what? I probably couldn't have even articulated, because I was kind of grieving. I was dealing with so many different things. And what do we do when we are grieving? We tend to internalize. And I think that sometimes I kind of felt some shame. Like, what is wrong with me? I'm on the antidepressants. It's not like I have to drag myself to work and punch a time card. Like, there was this place that I sat in. I was like, something is so wrong with me. Like, I really don't have that much to be unhappy about. So why has this cratered me? So there was some shame that, until I could wrap my own mind around really what was going on inside me, I don't think I could have articulated to you in a way that you could have grabbed hold of.
That's fair.
It took a little while.
You've used two words that has now triggered a quote from Jamie Winship. Jamie Winship wrote the book Living Fearless.
Yeah.
Great book. Highly recommend it. But he said there's three things that really hold people back. This is a general statement, but we can easily tie it into what we're talking about now. Fear, guilt, and shame.
Yeah.
And you've used fear and shame.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like guilt can be one of the heavier ones.
Yeah.
Because we feel like, because how many times have we heard, I just hope I don't mess up my kids.
Mm-hmm.
I hope our arguing, if that's the parental pattern, hope our arguing doesn't screw up our kids. People with money, I've heard them say, I just hope my money doesn't screw up my kids. So fear, guilt, and shame are three characteristics that really don't have a place in that. You'd read a quote to me the other night that really epitomizes, as we move into this empty nest phase, that if we understood a lot of these frameworks early, instead of hearing about it, maybe post empty nest, because our kids are 36, 33, and 31. We're well into empty nest. And I know a lot of other couples our age with kids similar ages, they're still trying to figure out how can they create a positive relationship. So it can be done. So the hope on this is, I don't care where you are in the empty nest phase, work can be done to revitalize those relationships.
Sure.
I think what the quote I'm going to ask you to read, it's the one that's real direct about, Mom, get your act together.
Oh, Mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
Yeah, that one. Because it's also goes for Dad. But I think if we are pre-empty nest and we understand that the framework that this lady talks about, because it's bold, it's direct, but I think
it's long.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Is our producer okay with that? He's okay with that.
Okay, all right.
All right. So why don't you share that, and then we could probably have some good dialogue with that.
Yeah. I don't even know who I got this from on Facebook, so I'm sorry. I want to give you credit. I just don't know who you are. but this is not my writing, but it's about Gen Z. And I don't even think it applies to just Gen Z.
No.
I could put each one of my children in here,
Absolutely.
and they're millennials. So Gen Z is not going to come visit us out of obligation. Let me repeat, we have not raised adults who are going to come back home to visit us just because they owe it to us, just because we're their parents, and just because they should. Gen Z pays attention to how they feel when they're with you. They pay attention to the tone of the house and if it's enjoyable to be at home, and they've been trained to do this. So if you are letting the unhealthiest person in the home set the tone and everyone tries to manage their own emotions around that, you're in for a rude awakening. Remember the old saying, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Well, that's bullcrap. If mama ain't happy, mama better do some work on herself.
You cleaned that one up just
a
little bit.
She better do some work on herself and learn to understand her own needs. She better get busy learning how to meet her own needs and how to ask for the needs that are to be met by her partner. She better learn what behavior comes from her when her needs aren't being met and get busy being apologetic and accountable for how she shows up. She better take such good care of herself that the people around don't feel like they have to walk on eggshells to keep mama happy. How about that? Guess what? The same goes for daddy. Daddy better figure out how to feel his emotions and take really good care of them. He better figure out how to speak with curiosity and compassion and find a soft place for himself and others. Daddy needs to take such good care of the little boy inside him that he shows up with emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. This habit we have of letting the surliest member of the family set the tone for get-togethers or even day-to-day life is done. It's over. You want a great relationship with your adult kids? Get busy looking in the mirror. You want a great relationship with your adult kids? You better be a likable person, someone they want to be around. How do you show up? What's the tone of your house? Are you good at regulating your own emotions, or do you emote all over those around you? Do you feel your own needs or sit back angry that they aren't being filled? This person says, I grew up in a home with a lot of negativity, so I choose joy for the tone of my house, the tone of my family. I don't fake it till I make it. I don't fake it when I'm not feeling joyful, but I notice that part of me. I show her curiosity and compassion. I love the heck out of her and I regulate myself. It means that's the tone of our house. So we do our best to maintain that. I take such good care of myself. This is a choice she's made. That joy is the top emotion that I feel on most days. It means I engage in things from my joy list, which is, she calls it a dopamine menu, and I loved that. I take and engage in things from my joy list on a weekly basis, and I choose joy as often as possible. Why do I do this? So my kids don't have to hold my emotions. They're holding enough on their own. Why do I do this? So my kids don't feel the need to have to take care of me. Why do I do this? So my home is an emotional, safe place. Why do I do this? Because home feels so much better with joy inside of it. And I do it so that when our family grows, it's our home that they want to share with, our home they want to come back to, and our home that we celebrate in. So you better know
That's strong.
The tone of your home. And I look back on that period of our lives when I was depressed, when I was fearful and worried about, oh dear God, what the heck are my kids doing? Oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? Because I don't even know who I am anymore. What if? And when you step into a home that's riddled with that kind of energy, it automatically gives me such compassion for my kids, even though a couple of them were being knuckleheads. But that had to have been a really sad space and a really unnerving place to come home to, because even now, like if my mom's not doing well, if your parents aren't doing well, that's unnerving. And we're almost 60 years old. And so I can't imagine how that felt for my kids. And it makes me sad that I sat there for so long. But on the flip side, I had to sit there as long as it took me before I got angry enough to decide, well, shoot, nobody's going to fix this but me. It's got to be me. You can't fix it for me,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So many things were running through my head on that. Wrote a few of them down. One of them that you mentioned, when you were talking about the energy of the home.
yeah.
We did an episode probably 3 back, somewhere in there, on the energy.
Yep.
And this lady just nailed it. It's
She nailed it.
Energy of the home. You can feel it at the door.
Yeah.
Right. I don't even if they had it's keyless, but they walk in, they're going to feel energy when they walk in before they ever connect with us.
Yeah.
Right. The energy is there, and it's up to us.
Yeah.
And the other thing is look in the mirror.
Yeah.
I mean, if that doesn't set the tone of it is not my kid's responsibility, and this is the other thing I wrote down, my kids do not hold my emotions.
Yeah.
That could be a whole episode.
They do hold some parents' emotions though, but
I'm just going by what she said. But yes, I think that
they shouldn't have to.
That is an unhealthy position if my children hold my emotion, right? That means how they perform, how they react, how they follow up, how they communicate with me. If that's required for my emotions to be healthy, that is unhealthy.
It's so unhealthy.
Yeah. You'd mentioned too that when you had to sit there long enough until you were angry enough to do something about it, right? There's another great book that it really epitomizes that, and it's about energy, but it's called Power versus Force. And he puts a vibrational frequency on words, and it's an amazing book. It's very technical, so it's not necessarily a fun read.
Is this the push versus pull?
No, but
Okay.
we can get into that for you because I know you love that discussion.
We got in a fight over this the other day.
It was
Just in full disclosure.
wasn't a fight.
Oh, it really? Okay.
The point of what he's talking about is until somebody gets unsatisfied with where they are, they don't move. And you can't take somebody that is unhappy. If you're looking at this on
YouTube or on anywhere
iTunes, I've got my hands different, but you take someone that's unhappy, you can't move them to happy. There's like 6 or 7 steps in between there. They can usually go one rung, maybe 2, but usually one rung on the ladder at a time.
Would you call that a shift?
A shift?
Yeah.
A reframe, but something has to happen to get you to move from where you are to the next level.
Yep.
And it typically doesn't happen overnight. We've talked about that before. It's like when we're so used to the microwave society, we're so used to Chat GPT. It's all instant, and it's like, okay, I'm unhappy. I want someone to fix me right now. Mm-hmm. And if we were trying to rely on our children to do the fixing, well, it's unhealthy.
Yeah, it is.
So
well, and we talked about this. Did we talk about this in our last episode about how we live in such a we're an internet-driven society, which is super, super hard because we expect immediate answers. Like all you have to do is go to the internet and you type in a question, boom, you got an answer. And now AI, you've got answers, and they're fast and
real fast.
Yeah. And
it's
so
so impressive.
It is, but then we expect things in our lives to happen equally as fast. And there's no way that certain things are going to happen as quickly as an internet answer. So our expectations can't be patterned after just the internet or AI or Chat GPT.
Yep. So if we're now, we spent a little bit of time with Sally and her single mom with her children. What about if we were now looking at some of these already empty nest? Mm-hmm. What would you suggest to them? Maybe play off of what you just read. What
did I just read?
There was a lot there. The long thing that you just read.
Oh, about internet?
No, about the lady. Oh my goodness! Have you forgotten what you read?
I guess I did.
You've talked about
putting the basket in the water. Sorry. I don't know what you're talking about.
You
But
just read a really long quote about the story. Get your.
oh, yeah.
Oh,
that.
that
No, you were
one.
pointing to my notes and I was
No.
like, wait, what? I'm so lost. Okay, now what was the question again? Yo, I'm older. I don't always catch on as quickly.
It is fun though. Until recently, you wouldn't even use ChatGPT because you told me
I don't want the devil in my
I
phone.
don't want the devil in my phone. But I said he's already in there, so you might as well figure out how to sanctify him.
Yeah, I guess so. It's true. Well, okay. What I noticed about this woman is she decided she had an identity shift.
She did. That's a
And
great way
she
to put it.
chose joy. And if I'm relaying this back to how I felt, like we even talked about this, like I had to get out and do some things. I wish I had been as cognizant and as self-aware as she was, you know. I don't know that I thought cognitively, oh, I'm going to choose joy and inject joy into every aspect of my home and my family and my house. But I had to get out and do some things that brought me joy so I could figure out how my identity needed to shift. And I used to run a lot. I literally remember having to force myself through tears, y'all, crying, bawling my head off, lacing up my tennis shoes because I needed to get out and hit the pavement. And there were times that even during a run and praying and, you know, thinking, I would have to stop because I couldn't breathe because I would be overwhelmed and overcome with sadness and tears. Or a song would hit, like, you know, back then we had an iPod, you know, and I had all my music, you know, loaded onto this. A song would come up and it would remind me of something and I would have to stop because you can't run and breathe and cry at the same time. It's really, you should, if you can do it, let me know because it's hard. But what happened for me was the empty nest and sitting in that place became a little bit of a new normal. And then the new normal just became normal. You know, so that's what I'm talking about letting yourself have time. Like it didn't happen quickly, but I learned to engage in some things that brought me joy. And if I was filled up and more joyful, it was going to be reflected in the home because I do believe mothers are like a thermostat, you know, like I can choose to adjust things in my home, you know, and it starts with me, you know?
The only thing I want to say on when you said you wished you were more like this lady that wrote all that because you didn't, what we don't know is how old she is. We don't know if, you know, she may be in her 60s or 70s and is now reflecting back. And it's like, we don't know. So from an encouraging deal, it's like, what I don't want to ever come across as creating guilt, fear or shame that we talked about with Jamie. We cannot control the past. And even what you were talking about, it's limited how much control we really have in the present and future, right? But we can redirect or shift the framework that we walk under now or we live under.
Yeah.
You know, so one of the things is, and you've read this, we've done enough episodes now, some of this stuff's running together, but you read something the other day where this I think it was a mom that was talking about, it might've been on a previous episode actually, when she was talking to her kids on the phone, she did not use the words, why don't you call more?
Yeah.
She used the words, it is so good to hear your voice. That is a reframe. That is a shift. And when we're able to reshift or reframe some of these things, the energy changes, the energy in the home, energy in our relationship, you know, so, you know, some of these things that the note says, how do you choose to maybe even love your children differently so that it comes across as honestly caring instead of guilt, fear, or shame?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As far as question?
Well, and yeah, I think even communication, if you have communication with your kids, asking more questions, asking more than you tell, you know, because that's a problem. And that's a rut that I think parents get into is they're so used to directing and telling and asking, what do you need from me?
Yeah. Well, we did that in a previous episode too. It's like when like in a business setting, if I want to be the most interesting person in the room, I just got to be the most interested. Well, what happens when we carry that framework into a conversation with our kids, and we're more interested in how they're doing, and then hearing it, refraining from trying to fix anything. How can we become so interested in our kids that it really is life-giving when they talk to us? They know they're not going to be fixed or corrected. None of us are above reproach.
I think too, looking back, I knew I was moving into a new season, a new purpose. And my particular personality, I don't really love change. I mean, it's a natural part of life. Some people embrace change, but I don't. And so knowing I was moving into a different season, a different purpose, that's difficult.
Even great to understand, because for anybody that understands the DISC profile, you are a CS, and the things that the CS push back against is change. But we know that the one constant in life is change. So when you have one of these things, it's like we know change is coming. We have the choice to either begin to embrace it and figure out how can we prepare for it, which is that's that slow, subtle shift that is, I think, healthier than sticking your head in the sand until the day that they leave for college. And then now that it's a flip that is, a switch that is flipped. I keep getting that messed up.
I know. Yeah. I think that recognizing that I'm responsible. It's easy to blame kids or blame other things for why I'm sitting in this miserable place. And at the end of the day, who's the adult? How many times have we talked about this?
We are.
I'm the adult. Our oldest is 36, 33, 31. I can't sit in this place of saying, well, I don't want to text him. I don't want to call him because he might be busy. Yeah, he's busy. It's not might be. He's freaking busy. But I still am the parent. I will always be the parent. And it's my job to pursue. It's my job to pursue him, even as a 36-year-old grown man. That's okay, So instead of blaming my kids, instead of blaming my hormones, instead of blaming you for my misery, I do think it's time for parents to grow up and recognize, look, this is me. This is on me. I can change this. And it might not change my circumstances, but it's sure going to make it a lot easier to walk through.
See, there's a certain level of maturity that is required for what you just said.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
What I'm actually referring to is, John Maxwell says, age does not always equate to maturity.
Boy, that's the
just
truth.
because we are pushing 60 or people that are 70, there's certain level of maturity that's required to do what you just said.
And maturity comes from doing the work to heal.
It is, and it's being others focused and not self-focused. And, where am I getting my validation? Where am I getting my worth or my self-esteem? So all of that is, all right, great. We have wonderful kids. We can live vicariously through them to an unhealthy degree if we're not careful.
We can.
Right?
Yeah.
But
at some point, that's got to end too.
It does.
Because you can't ride the coattails of your kids' lives. So that's what I mean about a different purpose. There's a bigger purpose, and I just couldn't see it because it was the only things in front of me were me, how sad I am. I don't like this. I don't like the change. Well, if that lasts forever, then.
Did you have another quote that you were going to possibly read?
I don't think so.
Okay. I'm thinking you did. When I've looked down some of the Facebook groups, the empty nest ones, I know you've got one that's out there. What's it called? If anyone wants to jump
Beyond
in.
the Nest.
Beyond the Nest.
Yeah. I need to make it public, but I started that like 6-7 years ago.
Right. And then you got away from it. So I think you're revitalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
What I have and this could be a stereotype, but what it does seem like is the vast majority of people in empty nest are not happy.
Yeah. A lot of them are not.
And that's where it's like, put your big boy pants on and deal with it, or
your big girl panties.
Big girl panties and deal with it. But
Yeah.
part of it is recognizing that no one else is responsible for my emotions more than me. And if I'm going to be the big heavy in the room, it's this. Get over it.
Yeah.
Do the self work, the deep work in yourself, so that your emotions aren't dependent on really anyone else. I would even go as far as say my emotions and self-worth can't even come from my spouse, let alone my children. That is unfair responsibility that I could place on you. Definitely unfair responsibility I could place on them.
Here's the rub.
What is the rub?
When someone brings this to your attention, if you're not aware, if you're not self-aware, how do you respond?
Typically defensive.
Well, I'm not saying you as in you. I'm talking about people in general. How do people respond when somebody says to you, dude, you got to get a grip. Have you thought about X, Y, Z, And I think there's some hard questions that people should ask themselves. One question is, who do I give permission to climb over my walls and tell me the hard things that maybe I don't want to hear? How do I respond when I hear something that hurts or that bumps up against my fragility? How do I respond in that moment? Like, take note of, am I defensive? Am I hurt? Do I retreat? And then have you thought about having your kids audit you? We talk about auditing a lot.
Yeah.
That's not an easy thing to do, because you got to be ready for, if your kids will be honest, if you've spent a lifetime of your kids not being able to be honest, if you're the flame that all the moths have to flutter around to make happy, well, you're probably not going to get honest answers.
Mm-mm.
But in our family, we usually get honest answers. How do I respond when I hear something that is like, oh, ouch, that doesn't feel good? You got to figure these things out. And
I think it was 1 or 2 episodes back, we talked about how do you create that emotional safe space, and that's really what you're talking about. If we have not created that emotional safe space, we could ask them that question.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get full, transparent questions from them, because we've not done the hard work to create that space.
What would you say to parents, Lance, who are going to be going into empty nests that are maybe, 3, 5, 10 years away from empty nest? Like, what's the biggest thing that you could tell them that would make the most impact for what they're going to go through?
It's a great question. Well, a lot of things that you and I have talked about is think beyond next week.
Yeah.
Knowing that we have, let's see, what empty nest is probably for parents, 40s into the low 50s on average, somewhere in that range.
40,
so there's enough
mid-40s.
life experience for the parent that is getting ready to be an empty nest parent to know that life is, one, it's hard, and 2, it's not fair. So if I'm cognitive of those 2 things, especially, how can I equip my son or my daughter to begin to be prepared for that life out on their own? Because part of it is, when I am more focused on equipping someone else for a transition at a subconscious level for me, I'm also equipping me for that transition. But if I'm only looking at this current school year, or I'm only looking at this current sports year, that's a very short look. So I would encourage parents to let's look at a 5-year look, or in what you said is 5 or 10 years. Can we do a 10-year look? Right?
Yeah.
That takes intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
It also takes being inconvenienced. The other thing I would say is get in a good, healthy circle.
Mm-hmm.
get involved with maybe parents that have already walked the empty nest road. Inquire of them. Be a resource for other people.
I even think locking arms with people who are going to be going through empty nest about the same time you are. Walk through it together so you have community. And I don't think just going out on the road and grabbing any Tom, Dick, or Harry is going to work. I think finding your tribe to walk through, people that you trust, maybe people you've been in a relationship for a long time that you literally are tried and true friends, and don't do it alone. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable with, because you have to be, like even our friend group, like there have been times we have had to be very vulnerable with them and vice versa, and that has been so life-giving to us, So yeah, that's great. Those are good. I think being really self-aware too is key.
Yeah. I think your advice on don't do it alone.
Yeah.
What is your core group? Who is your core group? Do you really trust your core group?
I think the danger, if there's a caution, if you're giving people that are 3, 5, 10 years out from empty nest, the danger, like for me, if I'm putting myself in that spot, is it's easy for me not to be committed to thinking about that because it's so far away.
It feels far away.
I can move that to the back burner. And what happens is if I move it to the back burner, sometimes it doesn't ever come to the front burner,
Yeah.
And so what are we going to do when our cats leave home? Like we got a cat here. Sorry, I got distracted by the cat.
So back burner.
Back burner.
I don't care.
I know. But it is. It's what's easy to do is easy not to do.
And who said that?
Jim Rohn.
Very good. Oh my word.
So that's the caution, is you have to be committed if you want to get a hold of this, if you want to make those small, implements in your life.
So let's close it up. It sounds like we're winding down.
Do it.
My biggest encouragement to folks would be to reframe how you think. If you're thinking the best, if you're declaring you're scared to death, if you're fearful of this next season, those words will become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, they will.
So I would encourage you your word is shift, mine is reframe. They basically mean the same thing. Reframe what this next season is going to be. Look forward to it, lean into it, recognize that one, like you said in one of our other conversations, it is a natural process. It's going to happen. So how can we make the absolute best of it? Reframe, change your words.
Yeah.
And it'll absolutely change the outcome.
Yep.
Good with that?
I'm great with it.
All right.
That's amazing.
Shut it down.
Shut her down. Thank you so much.